Just imagine you welcome a son-in-law into your family. You're not sure at first. You think, is this guy good enough? Then there's songs of him doing whatever to your daughter. But none of it matters because he scores the winner in a European final. Welcome to the Anglo-Italian pod. As always, my name is Rory and I'm joined by two very good friends. Let's first go with
Adam and our very bespoke friend,
Tom.
Here we are, boys. Welcome back. Tom, it's been a good while since we've had you on.
Yes.
Very, very happy circumstances to have you on. So, first things first, how's the head today? Oh, not feeling too rough, I hope.
Yeah, no, it wasn't brilliant this morning, if I'm honest. But when you remember what the result was, it kind of paled into insignificance. And there's a lot more happier hangover than it normally is, that's for sure.
Definitely helps.
Yeah, logging on to work at 8:30 this morning wasn't much fun, put it that way. But
yeah,
all good, all good.
Yeah, there would have been a few sharing your pain. I think I did see a few funny videos on Twitter of people marching into the office in their West Ham shirts and stuff.
Yeah,
so I think there's a few people sharing the pain. Adam, how are you doing, man? It feels like it's been a while since we've sat here, right?
I know. We've been talking offline about how it feels like it's been a long time, but yeah, don't worry. I am back for another pod, and I'm glad to be here rather than the destination that I was at, which was Disneyland. So yeah, me pretending to be really enthusiastic about Minnie Mouse and etc. But yes, instead I had lots of steps to follow as well as queues. But nonetheless,
oh god,
we are
just
here, back to normal.
How
life.
quick did the novelty wear off? I imagine like 2 hours in, you're like, oh Jesus.
I think it was about 10 minutes in, to be fair. 10 minutes in. Like, yes, the commerciality of Paris. That's all I can say. It's, it rakes
it's not
it
a cheap
in.
do.
Rakes
it is
in.
not a cheap do. No,
I combined my trip to Lyon away last year with a few days in Paris to keep Laura happy. Because originally it was supposed to be a weekend in Paris, and then we drew Lyon, so I ended up tagging that onto the break. It's quite good.
Very clever.
Good thinking.
Yeah.
Good thinking.
Yeah.
Well, we are back, and this week, of course, we're going to be talking about the Happy Hammers in Europe, an incredible last-minute win to bring home the silverware after 43, 45 years. We are going to be doing a little bit of Serie A talk, looking at the Fiorentina perspective, going to be looking at the happenings down in Milan as seeing Napoli implode, Milan decide to give them a bit of competition. And then we'll be talking a little bit about the transfer rumours around that are starting to pop up already. I promise we won't talk about Declan Rice too much, Tom. I'll keep away from that area for now.
I'm already come to terms with that. It's fine.
But listeners, we are going to see you on the other side after this very quick break.
Hi, I'm Phil Brown, and you're listening to the Anglo-Italian podcast.
And here we are. It is time for the Even Cooler Kids Club final review as we talk the Happy Hammers in Europe. West Ham 2, Fiorentina 1. I'll just give my thoughts. I thought that I could only see extra time. I could only see, and when it was 0-0, I thought this has got extra time written all over it, at least penalties. West Ham get the goal, and that was the only time where I thought, oh, West Ham them being ahead, I thought they might throw it away, especially when Fiorentina equalised, but they did get the winner in the end. Tom, how were your emotions throughout the final? How did you feel as the game went on? What were the high points, low points?
I thought the first half was quite lacking in anything of note. You could tell both teams were quite nervous. It was quite cagey. I think Fiorentina probably just about edged the first half without creating any real chances other than the disallowed goal. But yeah, the second half I thought it was much more lively. Both teams had a bit of a go. I thought we started very well, got the goal 2 or 3 minutes after the goal, looked like we might score another one, and then a couple of minutes after that Fiorentina equalised, and they were on the front for 10 minutes. Then I felt like we got our foot back in the game, and then, but yeah, I agree. I didn't really think we looked particularly like scoring a winner, but we did. That's the main thing.
But you did, it came
right at the end.
Right.
Yeah, so it was a brilliant way to a brilliant goal all round. I think it definitely shows the value of signing a player like Paqueta, because that ball he put through to Bone was brilliant, and that's what you pay 50 million quid for ultimately, isn't it? It's all well and good doing that in kind of a game where you're 3-0 up already, but doing it in a game like that at that time is it's pretty spectacular. But Bowen still had plenty to do, and he did it brilliantly, and he's done that quite regularly over the last 2 or 3 years for us. He's been great. So brilliant for him to score the winner. And yeah, I was ready for extra time, but to get that goal in the last minute was just unbelievable. And I thought it was a pretty poor game overall, but in a final, who cares if you win? That's all that matters. Nobody's going to remember that in years to come. It's just going to be who lifts the trophy.
Well, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think you're right. I think the first half, Fiorentina definitely, they dominated the ball, but we always knew that was going to happen. West Ham weren't really going to be looking to keep possession. And West Ham knew that if they could keep Fiorentina at arm's length, they'd be okay. They could catch them on the break. And the high line from Italiano, I think, was talked about pre-game as well. And Italiano, that Adam, I'll go to Italiano, said that they were going to try to do some cynical fouls and be a bit more savvy in what they were, because I feel like they felt they got caught out against Basel, especially in the final against Inter. They weren't that switched on. Do you think they managed to do that until the very last moment? Because I feel like they kept the high line quite well for a while.
I think it's always going to be exposed, to be fair. Given the way that West Ham approached it, especially with Mikel Antonio kind of holding up the ball and just trying to make sure that knock-ons were kind of to the wide players in particular. You know, Ben Rama seemed to be kind of a threat, especially down that, I felt like down that left-hand side, he was kind of cutting in quite a lot. So yeah, I felt there was always a weakness with Fiorentina. I didn't necessarily feel like, I think what he was alluding to, which was lost in translation, was he was trying to say that there would be a bit more streetwise, you know, and grow with the occasion, you know, be a bit more confident. Because I think, we always associate Fiorentina as being really attacking, but maybe not defensively minded. And I think that's what he alluded to. But it got lost in translation as Italians are just going to dive every time and win a foul and buy time. And I think that was obviously what the English media picks up on. But I thought it was, for what it was, I thought it wasn't a bad game. It wasn't as terrible as many people thought. I thought this was better than
Roma
the
Sevilla.
Roma game.
It wasn't as bad as Roma Sevilla.
It wasn't as bad as that.
The second half was good. I think the second half was good.
Yeah,
First half wasn't.
Exactly. But one of the points that I would pick up on with regards to Fiorentina, they something that actually Tom said in a tweet last night was there's a lot of concentration on Rice. And I felt like because there was a free in midfield, they kind of really stretched at times. So, you know, with what West Ham were doing, especially with Paqueta as well, kind of Paqueta found himself in really kind of free roles at times. And it was on both occasions, really, when you think about it, it was those free balls. I mean, he almost set up Antonio for the goal before Bowen scored. And if he just turned that in, I think you got a different complexion to the game. But I mean, Paqueta seemed to be just up for it as well. You saw even after they scored that second goal, he goes in very quickly to intercept a ball and block it. And it was just that kind of mannerism around West Ham. I think it's the Moyes effects, if I call it that. He really drilled it into that squad to make sure that they were fighting for it. And you could tell, even with the substitution, Agbona is brought on for Antonio just to defend it then, and rightly so. So I thought Moyes played it really well, considering we knew what to expect. But I don't know about what Tom feels, but we'll put it to him. Do you think that's the best you've played recently? Because I felt like that was a really solid performance without actually being too ambitious on the ball.
Yeah, I think it's the best we've played in a while. And towards the end of the Premier League season, we did pick up a little bit, and there were a few good performances against teams where we didn't quite get the results we wanted, but in patches we played quite well. But second half, certainly, I thought it was the most complete performance. And just picking up what you said on Paqueta before, he's been he had quite a slow start, and he wasn't. And what we were quite happy with all along was his work rate was incredible. So we signed a Brazilian number 8, number 10, and we're thinking he's just going to be tricks and flicks and fancy, but he's not. He works very, very hard, and he's done that all season. But what was lacking up until maybe 2 or 3 months ago was kind of him getting his foot on the ball and kind of making progressive passes forward, which is what we signed him for. So we kind of thought we've got this player to set up all these goals, and all he's doing is running around tackling, which is great, but that's not what we've signed him for. But the last 2 or 3 months, he's added that to his game in abundance, and he's been absolutely brilliant for us, and really excited to see him go into next season. Now he's fully settled in. Yeah, he's a real difference maker, that's for sure. And I felt like is it Amrabat Is that how you say his name? Yeah. I think he kind of nullified himself by purely focusing on stopping Declan Rice. He's all their good stuff goes through him from the little I've seen of Fiorentina previously to that game, and he kind of didn't really do much of that because he was too focused on stopping Rice. And I think that was kind of hindered Fiorentina quite a lot because they just focused on one player more than perhaps they should have done. But
I think there was a few mistakes that Italiano made. I think there was a few errors he made. Like Adam, you were talking about some of the substitutions he made. You were quite confused by. Now he started with the big calls by starting Kwame over Ikone and starting Jovic over Cabral. Now Jovic obviously had that disallowed goal, managed to break his nose, was off in the first half. Classic Jovic. It never goes well for him. Do you think that Italiano got those calls right? And do you think the calls he made later on in the game helped or hindered Fiorentina?
I feel overall he kind of read it wrong because I think he set himself up to almost try and have Jovic to be that battering ram essentially, and kind of be the wily striker in the box essentially. And you know what? If it wasn't for that injury, maybe we would have seen a lot more of Jovic. If it wasn't for that injury, he does really well. It has to be said, to try and get his head, although it was offside, he did really well. But I was confused because Ikone, I think, would have been a lot more of a threat, especially he kind of comes in on the left, can go on the right-hand side as well. Cabral's been the more informed striker out of the two when you compare it with Jovic as well. So that was a bit of a surprise. Like I say, I feel he's just defensively and in the midfield, maybe he could have shored it up a bit more, being that as a final. You can be a bit more ambitious towards the second half or like the final third of the game potentially, where, if it's still 0-0, you're going to be chasing games. So there's nothing lost there, right? So, for me, I think that's just the naivety perhaps on Italiano's side. He is very young, and I know he's been talked up as being the replacement for Spalletti at Napoli. But that's 2 finals now that he's going to be judged on. And it seems really harsh because, he's done magnificently to get Fiorentina to this stage, I think it has to be said. But he's going to be judged on those finals, unfortunately, and the way that it played it. Now, there's a balance here. It's whether you want the style or whether you want the substance. Now, obviously, Moyes is much more substance-based, and he's got the result here. So you have to say he's probably the more successful out of the two. But Italiano, I hope he can learn from this and kind of learn what he needed to do. You could tell at the end, though, he was so frustrated at his players. So it felt like there was a game plan there, and maybe they didn't execute it. So
I think it was a mixture of, I think he was very pissed off with himself as well. You could tell that because he was overreacting to everything. I think you could just see that it was getting away from him. And then he saw the players kind of, I think they dealt with a lot as well, but you could see him just getting frustrated with the evening slipping away from him. On the other hand, I think David Moyes played it incredibly well. I think one of the big decisions was to not start Cresswell and to start Emerson instead. We were talking about it during the game, Tom. He could probably be at fault for the equaliser. But do you think that was a decision in general that paid off? Because his experience in big games, like first player to win all 5 European trophies now, do you think that was like a brave call that worked?
Yeah, I think so. But it was a very bold call because you've got 2 very different left backs. And I don't really think Emerson is a left back. I think he's an attacking fullback. His defending qualities are limited, I'd say. Whereas probably Cresswell's the opposite. He's a very good defender. He's very good at set pieces, but his legs have gone a little bit now, so he can't get up and down as much as Emerson does. So that was kind of the choice he had to make. Do you have that dynamic up and down the wing, or do you have a solid defender? And to be fair to Moyes, he went for the decision nobody expected, and he went for the dynamic, forward-thinking, left attacking fullback. So I don't think you can question the decision because we won, but it's one of those really. If you lose, that's the sort of thing you're going to be picking the bones out of. But when you win, you're like, he's got it right, hasn't he? So, and then he did the same on the right flank as well, because there was a big question mark over whether it should be Thilo Kehrer or Soufal at right back. And he went for Soufal. I think the fact it was in Soufal's home stadium probably just edged it for him, thinking that emotional attachment might give him that extra 5%, because Kehrer is another one who's had a very slow start, but the last few weeks he started to come to the fore a lot more as well. So Yeah, two bold calls at both fullback positions, and don't forget Zuma. We had to take Zuma off injured after an hour as well, which was another big blow in defence. So he's dealt with all those decisions and all those kind of in-game decisions as well very well, which has been a fair criticism levelled at him all season really about his in-game decision making and his ability to kind of change things as he goes along and not being able to adapt his style when things are going away from us and stuff like that. But I thought last night he did all that very well.
Yeah, I thought, he managed it incredibly well. The decisions worked out. And then we do need to talk about Jared Bowen, right? It's a hell of a finish. He's a player that he said himself hasn't really had the consistency that he would have liked this season. I think most of the West Ham team would say that, to be fair, considering how the Premier League season went. But how important a player is he for you, and how impressed have you been with him towards the end of the season? He's been improving, right?
Yeah, back to his best again. Like we've had kind of a good 4 or 5 of our players have really kind of come back into form at the right part of the season, which is one of the main reasons we won last night. But yeah, Jared Bowen's been excellent over I think 3.5 years he's been with us now. He's excellent. His work rate is incredible. The way he gets up and down, he's always kind of tracking back. He's always making tackles. He must have made 5, 6 or 7 important blocks last night as well. And then he's always kind of waiting for that ball. He said himself, you get like 10 opportunities to make that run and you might get one of them that hits the mark. And the thing, one of the most impressive things about that goal last night was it wasn't just a snapshot that fell to him. He had 5-10 seconds to think that through, and it must have been going through his mind. This is probably the most important shot I'm ever going to take. And he still finished it brilliantly. Yeah, so he had a dodgy start to the season, and I think he said himself a part of that was down to kind of missing out on the World Cup as well, because he was in 2 or 3 squads before the World Cup, and then he just missed out. I think he was a victim of a slight drop in form, and also that being a very, very obviously competitive part of the pitch for England. But yeah, that affected him quite a lot as kind of the team was poor as well. But yeah, overall he's been absolutely exceptional for us, and then we saw the best of him in the last kind of 6 to 8 weeks of the season as well.
So, Adam, how much of an enemy of football is Robbie Savage? Because he completely ruined that moment.
God.
His commentary was absolutely atrocious. Take us through it. I honestly had to put the telly on mute. So I was just like, would you shut up, you muppet?
Yeah, my ears were bleeding by the end of it. I put that in a tweet. Unfortunately, he did ruin not only just the commentary in general, but the last bit as well. He does this kind of roar that's like, "Come on, boys, you can do it!" Like, and it's like, why are you even saying that? Like, commentators don't do that. Like, just shut up, basically.
Thinks he's still a player, I think, doesn't he?
Yeah. And it just ruins the whole experience. Him alongside Steve McManaman, just get them off as soon as possible.
I did find it was Don Hutchison who was next to him, wasn't it? And when he was shouting, he just said, "Now let's just give it 5 seconds and so call this in." Basically just telling him to shut the fuck up. Let's just soak in the sound for 5 seconds, Robbie, please. But yeah, incredible evening. So Tom, looking back at the campaign in general, like when you were going into the Conference League, starting it all the way in June, which is like basically a calendar year ago, were you looking at it thinking this is something we can win, this is something we should be looking at winning?
Yeah. Looking at the teams that were in it, and looking at how well we did in the Europa League last season. I mean, we beat Sevilla last season, and we beat Lyon. We beat some proper teams there, So when we looked at the draw for the Conference League, we're thinking if we turn up in these games, we should have a good chance. And that's how it panned out. We had the run to the final. I mean, I don't want to be too disparaging about any of the teams we played, but I'd say last night was the only team that on paper could be considered a fair match for us. Every other team you would expect us to win and expect us to win comfortably. That's not disrespecting any of the other teams. It's just our team is expensively assembled, those other teams kind of don't have the level of kind of players that we've got. As simple as that. I think you can use whatever metrics you want. That's just factual as far as I'm concerned. So my worry was last night, the Fiorentina are obviously a proper team with very good players, and they've done well in Serie A. They've got to 2 cup finals, so they're absolutely no mug. So I was a little bit worried about is this going to be where it comes to an end, because this is the first real test we faced in Europe. But But yeah, at the end of the day, in 10 years' time, no one's going to be thinking,
No.
oh yeah, you had an easy run to the final. They're just going to be thinking, we won a trophy and we've got into Europe again next year. So that's the main thing. But yeah, it's I think overall the competition. I must admit, I was when they first announced they were doing it 3 or 4 years ago, when they said they were doing it, I was a bit like, what's this all about? Is this just kind of another money spinning thing? But when Roma won it last year, so I'm not just saying it because West Ham have won it now. When Roma won it last year, I was thinking, yeah, this is actually really good. It gives that kind of tier below that are kind of locked out of winning trophies, that opportunity to play in Europe and push and go far into the competition. So, and that obviously proved true for us as well this season. So yeah, I think it's a really good, positive competition, and yeah, really happy with it, obviously.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think you hit the nail on the head. I really love it as a competition. I love that it gives. I think it's just been one of we criticize UEFA and FIFA plenty of times when they come up with shiny ideas. This is a good idea. It's working.
Yeah.
It's like with the Champions League, it's always going to be the same 5 clubs that win it, more or less.
Yeah.
The Europa League has a bit less predictability. And then the Conference League, I feel like, is just going to be every year. It can be a completely different winner, unless Sevilla are in it, then they'll just win it every year. But I think it just provides that bit of freshness around European football when it's starting to get a little bit stale. So I think I absolutely love it. And anybody who's disparaging it as a tin pot trophy, like if your club won it, you would not be treating it that way. You would just wouldn't be treating it that way. So I love it as an addition. But if we look back across the campaign as well, what are the moments that stand out to you? Are there any players, any performances, any moments where you're like, I really enjoyed that game, that moment across the campaigin?
Just in Europe, or
generally? Just in Europe. We can talk about the Premier League season as well.
Yeah, I was going to say there's not many highlights to that. Yeah, obviously last night was obviously the main highlight, but there's not really that many. But it was bizarre because we just breezed through it. I think we won 13 out of 14 games, and every single one was just bit of a procession. We didn't really play that well in most of them, and we just kind of just did what we needed to do. And the best thing about it overall, I think, was that it was just a nice distraction from an very abject Premier League season. I think that was what we were enjoying the most. I think perhaps my favourite bit was the Anderlecht home game, because I went to that one and I kind of experienced it, and actually got to go to a West Ham game in Europe, which I've never done before. So that was kind of a personal highlight for me, actually physically seeing West Ham in Europe, because 5 years ago, that was kind of a bit of a pipe dream, to be honest. It was something I perhaps never thought I'd see again. And obviously, let alone winning something in Europe, that's obviously the next level. So, yeah, I think last night was the overriding highlight. And other than that, just kind of being in it and being around it and experiencing those days.
Nice. And as we said, next year, Europa League. So this is like, you've got you stayed in the Premier League fairly comfortably in the end, like you got there, if you know what I mean? But now, what do you need now to be able to kick on and compete in the Europa League again? Because I feel like part of this squad may disappear. There may be a bit of a rebuild. Where does this squad need improving? What rebuilding needs doing?
Recruitment is going to be massive. Obviously, it's looking highly likely that Rice will go, and then obviously we're going to need to replace him. So there's the fella who I think we've already making a move for. I've forgotten his name. The Mexican midfielder who plays for Ajax.
Okay. Yes. Now you're testing me. I know who you mean. I'm going to find his name.
Yeah,
Alvarez?
I think so.
Yeah.
Alvarez,
I think so. I think that's it. Yeah, apparently they're looking at him, and he looks quite good. I've done a little bit of YouTube scouting on him. He looks okay. So obviously replacing Rice with 1 or 2 players, probably 2 central midfielders. I think we need. Definitely need a right back. Probably need a left back, and then I think even though we've got 3, I think we need a centre forward, because Antonio's kind of 33, pushing 34. Danny Ings and Skamaka as well. They're both good players, but they don't really fit the system. So, and then obviously a lot of it depends on whether Moyes is there as well, because there's a lot of talk whether he'll be there, whether he won't be. Because if he goes, someone else comes in. Maybe suddenly Skamaka becomes a viable option, because there's no doubt he's a very good player. He just doesn't work for West Ham, and that obviously all the question marks then come into why the hell they signed him, which is a big thing, because they did exactly the same thing with Sebastian Haller, but that's a whole whole new question. So I think the first bit they need to settle is who's going to be the manager. I've got my view on that. I don't think it should be Moyes personally, but once they've settled that, they've got those kind of 3 or 4 key positions to identify top quality players for it and fill them in the mold of whoever the manager is. How will they want to take the team forward? So it's one of those.
How likely
really,
do you think it is? How likely do you think it is that Moyes goes now? Because you would think that this win is going to be a lot of credit in the bank. I know the Premier League season was awful, and you have to look at you had more wins in the Conference League than you did in the Premier League this season. That is terrible. How likely do you think it is that he leaves?
I personally think he will stay. I think the owners like him, and I think obviously that doesn't really matter what the fans think. If the owners like him, he's still going to be there. So I think he will stay. And the only way he will, the most likely way he would leave, I think, was if he just said, "I've had enough. I'm done." So I do know he has become quite frustrated with a lot of criticism he's been getting from the fans and stuff like that. So maybe he just thinks, "I've won a trophy now. I've had enough." Maybe he wants to go and take the Celtic job, something like that, and he wants to kind of move on. I don't think they'll sack him. He's got 1 year left. I think the board's probably plan now will be to keep him for another year and then reassess. But I would be that wouldn't be my choice. But if they did do that and we started badly in the Premier League, I think then serious questions have got to be asked because the bad form in the Premier League goes all the way back to kind of February time last year. We ended last season badly, and then we've been obviously poor in the league all this season. So I was a massive fan. I think last time I was on here was with Adam on the preview show for the season, and we were all backing him, and we've given him time. But the league form just hasn't been good enough. And obviously this run in Europe has been amazing. It's the most amazing memory, and he will be a legend forever. And he's overall he'll be remembered fondly. But I'm just kind of thinking it might just be the end of the road for him now.
Yeah, it might be best to leave on a high, right? Just leave now before it goes bad again. Yeah, well, an incredible achievement. I honestly enjoyed every minute of watching West Ham lift that trophy. Absolutely fantastic. And before we leave, we're going to very quickly talk about Fiorentina. Adam, where does Italiano go from here now? Where do Fiorentina go from here? They've had overall a very good season. They were down in 16th. It looked like he was going to lose his job. Kind of similar to Moyes a little bit in the arc. It looked like it was going to go. They turned the form around, but he did get in the two cup finals. They did finish in the top half of the table. But he is being linked to the Napoli job. Do you think that these 2 wins is kind of good news for Fiorentina and means it'll stay an extra year? What do you see happening now?
I think personally he will make the move. I think if he's got the ambition, he'll try and go to a bigger club. Napoli will have the resources as well. So that's something that you could argue maybe hasn't necessarily had at Fiorentina. He's had to wheel and deal a little bit. But that's not to say, Fiorentina haven't backed him because Kone previous January window, they bought him for 30 odd million. So it wasn't cheap. And you think they got Anton Marek as well from Hellas Verona.
Brought in Cabral, he wasn't cheap.
Cabral, So, and they brought in Jovic, who wouldn't have been on high, cheap wages, let's put it that way. So, I know it's a loan deal, but there's probably some millions being spent on that as well. So, I suspect he'll want to test himself. And given the caliber of managers that possibly might be losing their jobs in Italy as well, because there's rumors about Allegri, for example. You never know what happens in Milan as well. It depends tomorrow, or should we say on Saturday when we're talking about Inter, whether Simeone and Inzaghi decide to stay there. I know he's had his own thoughts about the job as well. So I think for his ambition, it'd be great for him to try out a different club. It'll be kind of sore for Fiorentina. They'll have to rebuild. But I'm sure with the kind of stable kind of background staff as well as the structure that they've got, they'll bring in another promising Italian coach without a shadow of a doubt. And they'll just back him again. So there's a lot of suitors out there. It's just a question of what they do going forward. But whoever they do bring in, I think they've got to invest again because by all accounts, they've made 155 million out of this kind of trek as well. So I'm sure it's kind of very similar sums for West Ham as well from this journey as well. So, yeah, let's hope they kind of reinvest it, especially as Serie A don't have a lot of money. So yeah, they could buy a few bargains, couldn't they?
If you've got a pound note in Serie A, you're already ahead of like 19 other teams. I think like everybody's strapped. But I do think there is the makings of a very good squad there. Like the players you've gone through, like Amrabat seems perfectly happy there. Barak, Cabral, I think he's adjusting to Serie A. He is getting better. I think that is the makings of a really good team. I was impressed with Dodo last night as well. I thought he had a really, really good game. I've been impressed with him throughout the season at left back. I can never remember which side he is. I thought he's I never get it right.
Because Baraghi on the left.
Yeah, of course it was. But I was really impressed with him as well. So I think there is the makings of a decent squad there. So yeah, unlucky Fiorentina fans, 2 cup finals, and to lose them both is rough. But we're going to leave it there. And we're going to just say one last time, congratulations. Congratulations, Thomas. Congratulations, West Ham. Congratulations, Danny Dyer. You'll all be delighted. We are going to take a very quick break, and we're going to come back and talk all things Serie A.
My name is Massimo Morales, and you are listening to Anglo-Italian podcast.
And we are back. And despite there being no domestic football, or nearly no domestic football, the headlines certainly don't end, especially in Serie A, when with typical bureaucracy and organization, it has been an absolute shit show in deciding who is going to get relegated from Serie A. So, Adam, take us through the situation. What were the first decisions? Where are we now? What is going on?
Well, just to give a bit of context, so at the beginning of the season, it was decided that if there was a situation for the championship or relegation, that would be fought out with a playoff. And subsequently, when I was looking at this on Sunday, I was scratching my head because technically, if this was the Premier League, we'd be saying Hellas Verona have stayed up because of goal difference. But no, on this occasion, because the head-to-head's also very equal. So it basically means that Hellas Verona take on Spezia in a relegation playoff one-off match. And it could go down to the wire, Rory. I mean, it's going to be fascinating. But just before we lead up to that game and talk about who we think might do it, there's been a bit of a palaver around the location of where this match was going to take place, because that wasn't even cemented. So the FIGC
their inability to make a decision.
I know, right?
You've got a team. So you've got Spezia, which is kind of north. No, let me get this right. Northwest Italy. And then you've got Verona, which is northeast.
Yeah.
And then they go, okay, we're going to go right to the top corner and we're going to go to Udine. So both teams have to travel 4 hours rather than just putting it in Reggio Emilia in between them, which is what the decision they've eventually come to now. They're going to play it at the Mapai Stadium, which is where Sassuolo play. But just the initial decision tells you everything about Serie A and FIGC and how they make decisions, that they just either throw a dart in a map or look at the attendance, or I don't know how they figure it out, but they managed to get it wrong. They have now got it right. After a lot of online campaigning, both of the chairmen of both teams wrote to the FIGC and said, "What the hell are you doing? Like, what, this is ridiculous. A child could organize this better than this. Can we please think about it?" And they have changed their mind. But I like this idea of a one-off game. Now, in the playoffs in Italy, they still have two-legged finals, and we were complaining about this, going, who the hell still does two-legged finals? It takes away all the jeopardy. Just have a one game. Well, they've listened to us, and it is going to be a one-game shootout. They did draw both of these games during the season, which is why their head-to-head is exactly the same. So this is surely going to go to penalties, Adam, right? There's going to be nothing to separate these teams.
And I was trying to look at the history. I think this would be a first if it goes to penalties as well. So this is how massive the game is. So I dread to be that player that misses this penalty, because that's huge implications. We're talking about a payout of 25 million for either club if they get relegated, because they'll get a parachute payment essentially. And it's based on how many years you've been in Serie A as well. But yeah, I was also looking at the head-to-heads, and it's much more in favor of Hellas Verona. They've won 7 of the last 10 occasions against Spezia. Spezia only winning twice. And if you look at the form books, Spezia have only scored 3 goals, Rory, in the last 5 games. So it doesn't look too pretty. When you think about the last game against Roma, That was one of those goals.
That was one of the
three.
goals.
That was one of the three. And the other two were scored against Milan, if you remember that a while back.
Of course it was.
This was when Milan had a terrible run before that Champions League match against Inter. So it's it's going to be a special game. Let's put it that way. And
I think it's going to be the other thing that they've done is they've organised it so the second leg of the Serie B playoff kicks off at 8:30. So they've made this kick off at 9:15. So if you do want to watch both games, you can't. And it's on a Sunday. There is literally no damage in putting one of the games earlier than the other and going, right, people can watch both games. And it's literally, they are playing to replace each other. It's made for like a Super Sunday, build it up, get it all going. Just can't find their arse with their elbow, those lads. I don't know what they're doing. But Tom, would you like to see this system brought into the Premier League? Two teams finish on equal points. Their head-to-head is the same, so they have a shootout to see who goes down. Do you like the idea?
So is it purely because they've got exactly the same points? It's not an actual. It's not okay. Yeah, I like that.
Their points and head-to-head. That's it. Goal difference doesn't count.
No, I think that's good. Yeah.
I quite like it. It adds a bit more jeopardy. Definitely adds a bit more jeopardy. Keeps it interesting. But talking about the game itself, what do we expect, Adam? I think Nzola's going to be. We've talked about. You were talking about how Spezia can't score. Verona have zero threat up front. I do feel like Nzola, he's already been linked to all the clubs in Serie A. Maybe he has a parting gift to keep them up. I really want to see Verona stay up, I'll be honest, ahead of Spezia.
Yeah.
But Adam, how do you see this one going? Do you think they've just got that little bit more quality?
It's a one-game shootout. I think it's about who's got the metal edge at the end of the day. I don't think it's going to go down too much in terms of quality because I think both sides are very similar in that respect. I think there's probably better quality in the Spezia side than there is in the Hellas Verona side. But the form that they've been showing and displaying, I mean, they are a bit loose at the back. Ampadu in particular, he's just flying into tackles, getting red cards quite easily. And this is the difference. It's all about who's going to kind of get the ball by the grip of it and take the chances. I think you look on, I think based on quality, I'd say Spezia, but I think Hellas Verona have demonstrated in the last few weeks that they've got the determination and grit to actually grind out results. And I feel they were very unlucky against Empoli a few weeks ago, where if they hadn't conceded in the 92nd minute, then they probably wouldn't be in this situation, perhaps. But that said, I mean, it could go either way. It is really tight. So tight.
It's gonna be exciting, but I am probably gonna be watching the Bari game. I'm gonna have to have I'm gonna have to be double screening, I suppose. But we're gonna go there and we're gonna jump to the last team that Spezia did beat, Milan, as in fierce competition with Napoli. It's all fallen apart in Naples. Well, now it's all falling apart in Milan as the owners, Redbird, I believe they're called, decide to ignore history completely, forget everything they know about the club, and sack a club legend on Twitter. Don't tell any of the squad. Leao, Hernandez, Maignan, and I think Tonali all signed contracts and publicly said, we are signing these contracts because Maldini is taking the club forward. None of them were told beforehand. They did see it on Twitter. Leao has reacted on his Instagram live and on Twitter. So has Hernandez. They're the kind of more boisterous ones, aren't they? You can imagine those two doing it. And Maldini's left. All of this building that he's been doing, these clever transfers that he's been bringing in. Okay, De Ketelaere hasn't really worked, but most of them have. He's done it on a bit of a budget. I thought he was doing an incredible job. It seems that the interview with CBS Sport, where he said, I think it was Schmeichel, asked him, what do you need to keep continuing at this level? And he said, we need investment. We need to improve the team. We need more money. And it seems like that interview has cost him his job. Now, Adam, are you surprised that they've sacked him? It seems particularly stupid to sack. You don't just sack Maldini. You can't just do that.
No, that was a very strange decision because it's not just him. It's Ricky Massara as well, who's been the sporting director at the club. And Jerry Cardinale kind of gave the excuse of they wanted to change the transfer strategy, which makes no sense to me. But as we've indicated, it's clearly around those comments from the CBS interview, really. I mean, you think about the job that Maldini's done. not only has he been quite astute in the marketplace, I feel he's also brought down the wage bill considerably down,
Massively,
and that's something that's not been seen. And I think, you know, the quality of what Milan have done this season, given the circumstances as well. So clearly they didn't defend the championship, but they reached the semi-final of the Champions League as well with the same squad. They've got some promising youngsters coming through. Okay, De Ketelaere hasn't really shone through, but again, Leao didn't really flourish until his second to third season. So there's always time for these kind of players to settle in, maybe make a name for themselves. And you look at the future of that squad, you look at the back line. I mean, Tomori, Kalulu, Thiaw, once they're there, I mean, that's a solid base to work on. So I think if you look at Magnan as well, he's easily one of the top-rated goalkeepers around. So, you know,
I think he's like top 2 in the world, really. I think he's like right up there.
There's lots of players there that are going to be free agents, right? And I think what Maldini was alluding to is you need more depth. I mean, if you compare, we said a few weeks ago about how Inter played against Milan in that Champions League and the depth that they've got on the bench. That is what Maldini is talking about. He's talking about the depth that they've got in their squad, and they haven't got that at the moment. So it's a worrying sign because it feels like they're just getting yes men in, and it doesn't feel like they are necessarily led with a footballing mind. It feels like it's more business orientated. But what's your thoughts on this as well?
This is the interesting thing because it seems like so basically this is the same guy who owns the Oakland A's, right? It's the same guy who he's closely related to Billy Beane, or he's closely tied to Billy Beane, who's now at the Boston Red Sox. So if you've seen the film Moneyball, one of my favorite films of all time, I absolutely love that film. Billy Beane is the guy who came up with, or who implemented Moneyball in baseball, and kind of just through data alone, he built this team that was competing with the New York Yankees on a 20th of their budget, right? Now, it seems like he is going to be brought in to do that in Milan, or he's going to be a part of the team. It's something that, now there are a few teams that kind of do this, like Brentford lean very heavily on database and like this kind of Moneyball system. And they've been outperforming themselves for years now based on their budget. So you can see it can be done. But what Brentford have done is implemented it properly. They've implemented it over time. They've built a club identity around it. Their reserve team don't play with the other reserve teams in the Premier League. They go around the world and tour against other teams. They are completely separate to the rest of the world of football because they do it holistically, right? This feels like he's got annoyed at Maldini, sacked Maldini, and then gone, who do I know? Oh, I know that guy. He can do it, right? So I feel like it doesn't feel as joint up thinking. Now, I'm fascinated by the idea of Moneyball and the data behind it, and like this kind of hacking the system. I've read a few books about it. I find it really, really fascinating, and I would love to see it in another top league and in Serie A to see if it could be done. But I just don't feel like they're going to do it properly, and I feel like it's kind of more of a penny pinching tactic than anything else. It's a shame because Milan were building something. I think this could now see that Pioli stays, I'll be honest. I think they're unlikely to sack Pioli now. They've picked their man and they go, okay, this guy's not going to complain, so we'll keep him. I'm not sure how happy Milan fans will be about that, but this could be a very big summer for them because now I imagine, and I think I've heard that Leao's agent has been on the phone already to a few clubs. Maignan is picking up interest. Hernandez is picking up interest. And these are the players that, as you've talked about the promise in that team, these are the players that deliver now. These are the players that give that experience, that extra bit of like just leadership, whatever. And I think if any of them were to leave, and I mean, if even one of them were to leave, Milan could really find themselves in trouble because they've lent on. We saw what happened when Maignan was out injured, right? And they had Tatarusanu. We've joked about him enough, but like Christ alive, that guy isn't even Serie A level quality. Like the guy's not a goalkeeper. You lose Hernandez, and suddenly you've got, I don't know, is it Calabria who's starting? I'm not sure. Like the drop off is so huge. And if they lose Leao, my God,
massive.
It's absolutely massive. So I think it's really, really, for Milan fans, it's just fucking terrible timing. They're seeing Inter headed into a Champions League final, and Inter were supposed to be the crisis club. They are supposed to be the club that haven't got a penny. I still don't know how they're keeping the lights on, but somehow Milan have managed to have a worse week than them. It is it is impressive, almost, you would say. But we'll see what happens. Yeah, bad times. And Maldini should be picked up somewhere else. I don't know if he would actually go to another club, but there should be plenty of other elite clubs going. He is someone that can build something. He can get his ideas across. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him at least approached by other teams. I don't know if for him, like his career, it was Milan and Milan only, but we will see. We're going to cross the city for Milan, and I think we're going to go. Should we do the Champions League preview?
We can do if you want.
Let's do the Champions League preview. It's coming. It's getting very close. Saturday evening. Oh my God. It feels huge. It feels absolutely huge. And before we have our say, he was meant to come on the pod, but in typical Tommy fashion, he's never been the most reliable, but he has taken the time out of his day to chuck us this voice message. So this is how he is feeling ahead of the big game.
Hello, Anglo-Italian pod. Here it's Tommy. I'm super happy to have the opportunity to share my thoughts on the upcoming and very exciting Champions League final between the citizens and my beloved Nerazzurri. So thank you so much for this opportunity, Rory, Adam, and Andy. Now, what I want to say is that, of course, I am super excited. Nobody would have expected Inter Milan to make it to this final this year, but here we are, ready to take on one of the biggest teams in the world, arguably the best team in Europe this season with the best coach in bench. They are trying to score a treble, and they would be only the second team in English history to do it. And so I'm going to say right away, all the pressure, if I can speak English, all the pressure is on them. The pressure is on Manchester City to lift this trophy. It's not an Inter Milan, and this is awesome. We're getting in from the back door. Nobody expects us to win this game, or at least I would say 70% of football fans don't expect us to win this game. And my feeling is that it's going to be tough, but it's not impossible. Why is it not impossible, in my opinion? Number one, because we have zero pressure on us. We had a very interesting path to get to this final. It was super exciting to win both legs with an aggregate of 3-0 against our cross-city rivals. And I think we earned our spot in the Champions League final. Now, what I want to say is that I've seen a lot of cheap Instagram and Twitter pages and a few lazy journalists already counting Inter Milan out like the sacrificial goat, you know. And I think this is absolutely wrong, because I think they're not assessing Inter's core of players. We've got a fresh World Cup winner in Lautaro Martinez, who played various games with Argentina. He scored his penalty in the World Cup final. He knows something about playing with pressure. We've got two European championship winners in Nicola Barella and Alessandro Bastoni, an international goalkeeper, and Andre Onana. And at midfield, we also have Brozovic, who's already played a World Cup final. And up front, I mean, a super experienced player like Dzeko and Lukaku. Lukaku, now, I don't know if you guys remember, but Lukaku was the guy who saved Inter's goal on the line in the Europa League final against Sevilla a few years back. He went back to Chelsea. Now he's back at Inter Milan, and I think he's got some chips to take off his shoulder. And I think that we've got motivated players. We've shown that in knockout games we can do very well. We've shown composure. We've shown grit. We've shown determination. And we've shown that despite risking quite a bit, I mean, we even against Benfica in the return leg, we were up 3-1 and the game ended 3-3. We can be distracted, but I think that the players are going into this final with the right attitude. It would be historical for Inter. And I have to say that Inter Milan fans have been very poised. If AC Milan had beat us in the semifinals, oh my God, I wouldn't see the end of it. But Inter Milan fans have been very quiet, have been very silent, because we know that despite what some people say, that our Champions League win was the one against AC Milan. I think we all know that if we play like Inter Milan know to play a final, maybe we can upset the City. Forza Inter. Thank you so much, guys.
Well, I think he covered it all, but we do need to talk about it. It was great to have him on again. I think he made some very good points. So before we go to Man City, we will talk about Inter. We've talked about the experience in their squad. Adam, I'm going to go to you first. Of those players you mentioned, the Barellas, Dzekos, Bastoni, Onana, who do you think are the major difference makers here for Inter? Who do you think they're going to rely on the most? I think Lautaro is going to be absolutely key.
Lautaro is a big player, especially given his form. But the one player that I think can cause a bit of trouble for Man City is actually Barella. If they can get the ball to him, and he's got so much stamina, he seems to run up and down that pitch, but he makes things happen. As soon as he gets on that ball, he is decisive, I feel. So not only can he do the defensive side, he can do the attacking side as well. So I think he's going to be very critical for a Milan perspective in terms of how can they get the ball to him? How can they get him involved in the match? And how can they maybe make most of him as well? Because I think he can exploit what I feel is the weakness down that left-hand side. I think against Akanji, who I kind of rated in that semi-final, but I feel if there's an opportunity, that is the side where they maybe exploit it a little bit more, especially given that Jack Grealish is probably going to be on that same side. He can do his defensive duties, but if they can counterattack, that is going to be the critical point, is how can they get the ball as quickly as they can up the other end of the pitch. Obviously, we're talking about some experienced heads. They haven't got as much pace, but someone like Barella and Lautaro are the big men to get on the ball when you do the counter-attacks. So for me, they're going to be critical. But at the back, I think you also forgot about Cherby. I know we joke about him,
no, he's the forgotten hero, right?
Genuinely, when you're talking about someone that can just have that kind of calmness in those kind of moments, I feel he'll bring that to that defense, especially given that there's not going to be Skriniar there. So they're going to have to rely on him. Matteo Damian's probably going to be playing in the centre back role as well, which is madness when you consider he's just a right back, really. But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if Inter, should I say, do pull something out of the bag. But what about you? How do you feel it'll go?
I've said it from the beginning. I can see. I think I tweeted it a long time ago when Inter got to the final. I was like, they are going to piss off every English football fan by playing the most cynical Italian football. They're not going to attack for 90 minutes and they're going to win 1-0. And I can see it. I saw it from the beginning and I still am sticking to my guns. I think obviously Man City are the favourites. Obviously, John Stones has turned into Beckenbauer and everything just looks like this incredible team. But there is something about this Inter team. And I think the football they played against Milan in the semi-finals was some of the nicest football, some of the best football I've seen this season. They weren't just sitting back and defending. We were talking about it before. Within 3 passes, they were through an entire team and having shots on goal. Like their instinctive, quick breaks are really, really dangerous. And I think against the City high line, we've seen them struggle against Tottenham, for example. Like historically, they struggle against Tottenham, who are very good counter-attacking. And I think Inter, their strength is counter-attacking. So I think there is a chance there. But Tom, I'm going to ask you, are there any players in that Inter squad that you think, is there anything about that Inter team where you think City should be worrying about it?
I really like Martinez. I think he's fantastic. I think he is the standout player and to be fair, my knowledge isn't as good as you guys with Italian football, but when I've seen them play, he's the player that every time I've seen him, I think he's a proper player. I think he's the one that they need to kind of get in those pockets and space and kind of make room for him. Well, my worry for Inter is that they're just not going to get the ball. I think Man City will keep it as they do so well. And I personally only see the only way Man City losing is if Guardiola does one of his kind of final overthinking, changes what he's doing. For me, if Man City turn up and play like they have done for the last 2 or 3 months, I think they win and they win comfortably. So, I mean, boil it down. How many players in that? Even Martinez. How many players would get in that Man City team?
Yeah.
Martinez would be replacing Haaland, wouldn't he? So he's not getting in the team. I just can't see it. I think it's just when you look at the teams next to each other and the way they're both playing. Obviously, Inter are a very good side with good players, but I think Man City are just that level above. So I think Inter just need to kind of, like say, keep it tight, work very hard, make sure they're very kind of progressive and moving the ball forward very quickly on the counter attack, and then also just hoping Man City have a bad day. If you're playing against a team which are better than you in or every position apart from maybe left back, then you have just kind of hope the other team fluff the lines on the day, and you're at your absolute maximum. But I just can't see it. I just don't think they'll have quite enough. Like you talk about players like Matteo Darmian at centre back against Erling Haaland.
Yeah, it is a concern. It is a concern.
But it's. I mean, that's my. I've seen Man City a lot, like in the flesh as well, and they're just the way they move and the way they've got kind of interchangeable positions, and they've got such a strong bench as well. And you think that he plays like Riyad Mahrez haven't really got a look in the last few months, and he's getting pretty much any other team in Europe, wouldn't he? So I just can't see anything other than a City win. But that being said, he did fluff his lines the last time. He kind of overthought it against Chelsea, dropping Rodri and Fernandinho bizarrely. But he's already said he's not going to do that again. He's not going to.
Or is it a double bluff? Maybe it's a double bluff.
I just can't see it. I really can't see anything other than a City win. They're just a better team.
Yeah.
and most of the time, not all the time, that makes the difference when you've got better players. So there's just no real weaknesses. I don't think there's any weaknesses there that you'd say you'd want to exploit, because they've just got everything, haven't they, at the moment, Man City? It's
it is a terrifying prospect. It's genuinely a terrifying prospect. And obviously, like from the Arsenal point of view, going up against them in the title race, you very quickly realise they had zero weaknesses, and ours were very quickly exposed. And you're like, crap, we do need to be perfect. So I think Tom's right. Inter need to be at their absolute peak. They need to hope City aren't. But I'm choosing to believe that Inter can still do it, because I want to see. It's the one trophy I've not seen. Yeah. Oh yeah. It's the one trophy I've not seen celebrated in Milan yet, and the last one was the European Championship. And I might enjoy an Inter Champions League win more than that one. So it'd be nice to cleanse myself.
Won't be scared for your life this time.
No, exactly. Running home in this top, like absolutely belting it home. That wasn't a nice night. So hopefully, Milan will be celebrating on Saturday. But I do think it will be. I think it'll be an interesting game. I don't think it will be like a thriller, but I think it'll be tacticians will be fascinated by it. So I'm going to put you on the spot. I think we know how Tom feels. He sees a Man City win. Adam, I'm going to get a score from you.
I'm feeling the same as you. I'm feeling a 1-0 win for Inter here.
Believe 1-0 Inter, Tom. Let's get a
score.
I'm
going to call it a Cherby to score.
Should we stick a tenner in? Should we stick a tenner in each then when it takes?
Let's do it. I'm happy to. I just won the Fanta Calcio League, so I can spare a tenner. I'm all right. Let's do it.
I'll go 3-1 Man City.
3-1 Man City. Well, Adam's taken 1-0, so I'm going to have to go 2-1. 2-1 Inter now. I'm going to say that they get 2 goals. What am I doing? Madness. Either of you, one of you is getting my tenner, because I'm definitely not. Guys, we're going to leave the Champions League preview for now. Hopefully, we'll be able to get Tommy on post-final. Regardless of the result. I think it will be more likely one way than the other, but we're going to try either way to get
I wouldn't be on if we lost last night, put it that way.
I completely understand. But from the Champions League final, we are going to go kind of back, because we did miss Monday due to unforeseen circumstances. Apologies again. We wanted to quickly look at the Serie A weekend and just say arrivederci to a few legends who retired from the game this weekend. Some Serie A giants stepping away from the game. We're going to start with Ibrahimovic. I did see some edgelord on Twitter trying to be like, oh, he's bang average. Can't believe why everybody is going so mad about him retiring. Honestly, one of the most exciting players of a generation. Very few players I've enjoyed watching more. His goals are always outrageous, not just the overhead kick against England, but I remember a fair few back heel goals, karate kicks, flying headers, all sorts. Tom, when we mention the name Ibrahimovic, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? And a fan of him? He even tore it up in the Premier League as well.
I think there's probably the only argument you could say is he maybe overstayed his welcome by 1 or 2 years. I think probably should have knocked it on the head a bit earlier. But overall, talent, I think absolute supreme talent. And had it not been for Ronaldo and Messi, I think he'd be would have been right at the top of the tree. I think he's a brilliant player. And obviously the other thing is personality as well. he brings that in abundance as well, doesn't he? He's not afraid to say what he thinks, and he just kind of gets involved, and he's kind of created a lot of kind of stories and kind of a lot of things to talk about. And most people kind of love to hate him as well, don't they? Even if you're not a massive fan of his, you just kind of enjoy him being there because of all the kind of hysteria that comes with him. So I'm a massive fan. I think he's brilliant. I think he's brilliant to watch and supremely talented as well. I think when you look at his goals, I think he scored like 550, 600 goals or something in his career, and you don't do that in the leagues he's played in unless you're a brilliant player. And the only shame really is that he never won a Champions League, because he must be the best player not to win one. I'd say maybe there can't be many others.
Him or Ronaldo or Nine never won one either.
Oh right, okay,
yeah. But it's those two, yeah. I think it's those two.
Yeah.
And he did at one point seem to be running away from it, because he left Barcelona and then they won it. He left Inter, then they won it. It seemed like he was trying not to win it at one point. But Adam, your memories, thoughts of Ibrahimovic? It was really emotional seeing him say goodbye to the Milan fans. I didn't think he could cry.
Yeah, he hides that very well, doesn't he? But I did see a funny tweet that says, now we've got more lion calls for his commentary after his playing career. So we've got that to look forward to. But my kind of initial impressions was this kind of arrogant kid from Malmo. I remember his little bedroom wall where it's got pictures of certain players. And I think R9 was the touching story for me, where he said when he saw him across from him when he was playing for Inter, he could not believe like he was on the same pitch as him. And I think that was kind of testament of the guy as well, because I think he is very humble. I think he puts a face on a lot of the time about what he is. But yeah, I think Tom alluded to it nicely. He's won a hell of a lot in his career, despite not winning the Champions League. I have actually written it down. So 7 Serie A's. If you exclude the one that Juventus got minus one, then that's technically 6. 3 Super Coppa Italias, 2 Eredivises, 1 La Liga, 1 UEFA Super Cup, 1 World Cup, 4 League 1s, 1 Europa Cup, 1 FA Cup, 1 Community Shield. He's been numerous times as Ballon d'Or nominee as well. So, I mean, this guy has been phenomenal. And I mean, the karate chops, the moves that he's pulled out as well along the side. I think he's had a lot of bad press, but he's an attitude player. He's a very much an attitude player that you'd love to have on his side. And you can tell that even there was a little bromance with Mourinho as well. I seem to remember this little clip when he was at PSG and Mourinho was at Chelsea, and he loves it. So, it's going to be a shame to lose someone of his caliber, because I don't think necessarily we see that enough from players, just because it's the way of this age now. It's all about social media and presence now, and you don't get these characters so much. So I think we will kind of regret it in a few years' time, I feel.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely miss it. And if you haven't read his autobiography, you have to read it. It's honestly one of the best footballer biographies I've ever read. The first line of it is him just calling Guardiola a prick. It's fucking brilliant. Really, really, really good book. And I just have to finish on the story that always haunts me, which is that there are pictures of him in an Arsenal shirt.
Yeah.
He was ready to sign, and Arsene Wenger turned around and said, okay, let's see you play. And he says, Zlatan doesn't do auditions. And he walks out of Highbury, never to return. We were that close to an Henri Ibrahimovic front line. What could have been? What could have been? But grazie, Zlatan. And next up, one that was even more emotional, and one for completely different reasons, but very, very emotional, was Quagliarella. Now, he hasn't actually announced he's retiring. It's just that it's going to be his final Serie A game. I think he's still kind of wondering whether to stick with Sampdoria or not, I think, last time I saw. But his last ever Serie A game was, of course, in Naples, his boyhood club. And when you know the story about him and Naples, so he moved to Naples, really ridiculous story about a stalker, and he was terrible this whole time in Naples, understandably, because he had this absolute nightmare going on, photos being taken of his kids and his wife. He asks this police officer to help him. The police officer's investigating. He's telling him everything. Long story short, it turns out the police officer is the stalker, gets found out on a tiny little detail. Quagliarella then leaves to Juventus, right? But none of this has come out. None of this has come out at all. He leaves to Juventus. The Napoli fans hang banners calling him a traitor. You've sold out your city, leaving to our biggest rivals. Just awful scenes. None of this can be revealed yet because it's an ongoing court case. When it's finally revealed, and he does win Serie A with Juventus, has a great time there. When it's all revealed, the Napoli players unfurl a banner apologizing to him, saying, you'll always be a son of Vesuvius. We apologize. We're sorry. And seeing him have the opportunity to then say goodbye to Serie A in that stadium. Honestly, obviously, I was in Naples that weekend and I was kind of watching the game, and the emotion, like there was a tear in my eye. I was kind of getting really choked up. It was a beautiful moment. Everyone in the bar literally like stood up and were just like, there was so much respect for him. And another player who scores only beautiful goals. He's also a player that I saw someone tweet, if you showed someone who'd never seen football a Quagliarella highlight reel, they would think he was the best player that ever played the game because the goals are just insane. Like, Adam, I'm going to go to you first. We've loved having Quagliarella here, right? 16 straight seasons or 18 straight seasons scoring in Serie A. How much are we going to miss him?
I think we'll miss him for what he brought to the game. And in particular, that kind of Juventus spell was what he's been known for. But I mean, at the lesser clubs, so he started off his career at Torino and he had numerous different clubs before he kind of made his way to Napoli. As you said about that ordeal, wasn't great for him. But even since then, he's had spells at Sampdoria as well. When you look at his record as well, so he won something at Fiorentina, the Serie A title. He won it with Torino, Serie B title as well. So he's won quite a lot in his career. His goals, obviously, when you compare it to Zlatan, I was looking at it, it's very similar.
We've done him dirty a little bit in numbers, but the quality is up.
But the quality, I mean, the difference you see sometimes, you look at it, he's been nominated twice for goals of the year season in Serie A as well. So that tells you a lot about him. But he's fantastic character, will be missed. I think it'll be the best time for him to actually retire and just relax now. I don't think he needs another ordeal with Sampdoria, to be fair. This season's been bad enough.
I don't think he needs to stick around in Serie B. The guy's 42, right? I think it's time he took a rest. But Tom, any memories from Quagliarella? I still remember him for Italy scoring some beautiful goals.
Yeah, I think my first memory of thinking about him is playing on FIFA and him just kind of picking Juventus because they were the best team and he was one of the best players. And then I think he's one of those that's kind of massively underrated in outside of Italy, especially because in England it'd be kind of people kind of heard of him but don't really know much about him and stuff like that. But I mean, I've obviously don't watch Italian football as much as you guys, but from what I have seen of him, he was always kind of a really hard-working player, chipped in with plenty of goals, kind of was a good team player. Everyone seems to he seems to be one of those players that all of his teammates seem to speak well of from what I've seen, limited interviews and stuff like that. I think he's a great player, and it's just a shame. I think he works kind of there's like bizarre dynamic where certain players, happens in all countries, don't seem to get fully appreciated across the board. Maybe they're just not quite a media darling, or they just don't kind of fit in certain boxes to get kind of that little bit of extra promotion. I think he's one of those. So I've always thought he was a good player, really, really good, and exactly the sort of player you'd want playing for your team. And I guess one other thing I'd say is it's just a shame we never got to see him outside of Italy. It would have been nice to see him plying his trade somewhere else, and maybe that would have got him the accolades he deserves.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. But Serie A is saying bye to an absolute legend.
Yep.
Grazie, Quagliarella. And the final one, very, very quickly, another Napoli legend, Hamsik, has bowed out of the game. He was playing out in Sweden, I think it was. He's finally said goodbye to the game. Not just the iconic haircut, but it made me think.
Has he still got that?
He's still got it. Still rocking it. Absolutely still rocking it. But it did remind me of that Napoli team with the Cavani, Lavezzi, and Hamsik front three, which should have won so much more. But another super aggressive, exciting player, Hamsik. And it seems like I love his career, him going out to Sweden and just fucking having a great time. But yeah, Adam, memories of Hamsik, it is just that front three at Napoli, right? Where they just finished second forever.
Yeah, I seem to remember there was that famous game at Chelsea where they won in Naples and then came to the bridge and they should have won that game. They were pulling their hair out, literally.
But
yeah,
that's how we got it. Yeah.
Exactly. That's how it happened, right? But yeah, he was a phenomenal player, absolutely phenomenal. I think even Napoli fans kind of have him in their all-time 11 because he was just phenomenal. What he could do on a ball was just incredible. And yeah, I think that again, he's another character that we'll miss. Shame that he didn't win maybe more in his career, but again, he stayed loyal to Napoli for the majority of his career. So fair play to him. And yeah, as we allude to, maybe he should have won more. But
he is their all-time top goal scorer. I don't think I'm making that up. He overtook Maradona in the top goal scoring charts. I'm gonna double check that, but I'm almost certain that is true. So while I look up that fact, Adam, do you want to take us through? Were we doing transfer rumors? A few quick transfer rumors?
Yeah. I mean, we can talk a few different ones. The big news to come out today has been Leonardo Bonucci announcing that he will retire at the end of the 2024 season. So we're all rejoicing not to see that scumbag in football. But
he's given a year's notice for his retirement.
Yeah, well, he's still got one more year on his contract.
Yeah,
so
he needs a payday, apparently.
Off the books at some time. But yes, that'll be great news for the rest of Serie A because his shithousery has been missed for recent season. But the other big news, Rory and Tom, really the big one is Arkadiusz Milik. It sounds like Juventus cannot afford to buy him out of his contracts because although it was a loan agreement and they agreed to pay an installment of 12 million, they've decided against it. So Lazio are sniffing in, but they're not only just interested in Milik. Apparently, Piotr Zielinski, who we know wasn't going to be offered a new contract at Napoli, is apparently on Sarri's kind of lips. He wants him at the club. So that'd be a fantastic addition for Lazio.
Yeah, he's a very
good player.
Zielinski playing Sarri
looking at him last season. He was. So I did a little bit of research on him. He's a very good player. He scored a lot of goals in the Champions League as well, didn't he?
Yeah,
he chipped him with a few.
A lot of assists as well. So a fantastic player, a little foil as well. So it'd be interesting to see if they can bring in another striker potentially because Arkadiusz Milik hasn't got the legs sometimes, it has to be fair to say. But Pedro is another player that's really benefited, I think, from this season, as well as Zaccagni as well. So, they were the main kind of updates. But the other ones we have to talk about is Saudi Arabia as well. Although it's not Serie A, we have to talk about Saudi Arabia becoming more China, right?
We do need to get that. Very quick, I want to say Napoli have also been linked to Jorginho. Apparently, Arsenal aren't going to stand in his way, but also aren't going to sell him. There's rumours that he might be used in a deal for Milinkovic-Savic, which would be very, very exciting. But I'm trying not to get too excited. I can't handle this summer. So I just needed to say that. But we do need to go China, Saudi Arabia, the new China. God, I hate this. Tom, your first thoughts on this story? I just hate everything about it.
Just kind of the broad.
I
think it's just the way football is now, right? It's just so money driven. It's been heading this way for a long time, so it's not a huge surprise, and they're not the first country to do it. Based on that, I don't like the general concept of it, but if you just kind of accept that's what happens, I don't really have a huge issue. It doesn't bother me too much. Players like Benzema or Ronaldo, and I know Messi isn't, but if he did. Players doing it right at the back end, where it would kind of start to grate a little bit is if you get players going there in the real prime of their careers, because I do think that is a big waste. Because I know they're talking about kind of increasing the quality and stuff, but it's never going to get to that same level of kind of quality because you'll have 2 or 3 star players in every other team, and then every other player will be kind of a low standard, similar to what it was in China and similar to how it is in America to a degree, although I think the standard there is getting better. So that's it for me. For me, if it's a big payoff for time at home for some of the best players and that's what they want to do, that doesn't bother me too much. But if they start kind of picking up some of the best players in the prime of their career, that's when it'll start to kind of grate on me a little bit more. But just the way football is, I think you just kind of got to accept it. Every other team in the Premier League is kind of doing it, and then
Yeah.
They get upset when somebody comes in with even more money than them. So just one of those things, I think.
No, that's true enough. It's a very fair point. What I find it difficult with it is that obviously with them buying golf alongside it,
Yeah.
that you just feel like there's very much just a money grab on sport, that they're just trying to literally buy sports now. And I think what we could see is, now you made a good point about the MLS, but it's taken them a very long time to increase that quality. The quality is improving, but it's taken, how long ago did David Beckham go there? 15 years ago? I don't know how long, it's taken that long for the standard to get to where it is now, which is a pretty good standard, but still needs to improve.
You've obviously got the ethics conversation as well, haven't you, with Saudi Arabia? You've got the but that's obviously
exactly.
It's probably, don't want to delve too deep into that, but obviously that's probably a different conversation to have, is kind of why they're doing it.
Well, exactly. Exactly. But so I think maybe it is just a flash in the pan like China, and maybe it is, we're going to see this short burst, it won't work, and they'll get fascinated by a new shiny toy. Like Adam, how do you see? Do you see this as a flash in the pan? Do you think this is a long-term project? I feel like they do plan things quite well, the Saudis. Again, without going into the politics and ethics behind it, they're very good at planning.
Yeah, I haven't done a lot of research, but I mean, the main thing seems to be set around the World Cup. They want to get a World Cup, and they've seen what their neighbours Qatar have done. So clearly what they're trying to do is bring the standard of football, show that to the world, more to the point that, this is a welcoming nation despite the human rights issues. And I think the interesting point was picked up earlier this week in a tweet where the owner of Newcastle United owns 4 of the main clubs in Saudi Arabia, which is, like, I put out there, that's such a weird culture thing. Like, can you imagine someone owning, say, Chelsea, Arsenal, Man United, Man City, and then saying, we're going to buy all the top players in the world to play in our teams, basically? And that's what it feels like is going on right now, because Kante is also joining down there, and there's rumours about De Gea going to Saudi Arabia, which would be a blessing for Man United fans if that happens. But you can't blame the players, because the sums that are being kind of dashed up in front of them. I think Modric is another one that's been rumored to be offered like 400,000 a week.
Wilfried Zaha's been offered a mad amount of money as well, apparently.
I think Messi was like 500 million a year or something, wasn't it? Something insane. You're talking about making players who are obviously very wealthy, but then you're talking about pushing them into that almost like billionaire territory. Then it's just incredible.
It is incredible. It is incredible. We'll see how long it lasts. I think it could just stick to the older I think we will just see it to the kind of players that are slightly past it. But I also think that we could see a very ambitious them trying to set up a Super League with 2 of their clubs in it, kind of inviting the Premier League or whatever in, and being like, oh yeah, we'll finance it, we'll host it, we'll do everything, but you need 2 of our clubs in there or 3 of our clubs in there as well. I think this could be where it's kind of all heading. A little bit depressing maybe, but how else can we end the show? We will. So I wanted to say thank you for coming on, Tom. It's been too long. We will have you on again next season. Build up to next season, probably. We'll have you on, see where West Ham. We'll see where West Ham are then. But for now, we will be back on Monday to pick apart the Champions League final and whatever happens there. And then it will be the final 2 shows. We will be doing 2 shows, a Premier League review episode and a Serie A review episode separately of each other, giving out the much coveted Anglo-Italian awards. The one that Haaland is really waiting for. I think he might be getting Player of the Year. We'll be releasing them next week, I imagine. So we will see you on Monday, guys. As always, please follow us on Twitter at Italian Anglopod, on Instagram at Anglo-Italian Pod. You can find us on YouTube. You should be on YouTube. You can hit like and subscribe there. And we're going to end with our customary quote of the week. And it can only come from one man. Now, it's taken me a very long time to pick which quote, but it is, of course, from Zlatan, when he said, "When you buy me, you are buying a Ferrari. If you drive a Ferrari, you put premium fuel in the tank, you drive on the motorway, and you floor the accelerator." Guardiola filled up with diesel and went for a spin in the countryside. If that's what he wanted to do, he should have bought himself a Fiat from the start. Thanks for joining us, guys. We will see you next time.
Ciao.